What's going on, guys? Tosker here, and in this video we are going to talk about the INotifyPropertyChanged interface in WPF. Now, we are going to be working with this application that I already kinda set out the XAML, so if you choose to follow along, I will provide in the description a link to get the code here for the XAML, and you can copy and paste that into your window content. With that being said, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about the implementation of the property changed interface. And before we start jumping into coding, we're going to hop over to the slides real quick, and just have an overview on what it actually is, and then come right back here and dig in deep and start working on the example. INotifyPropertyChanged is an interface you can use in WPF to notify a client that the value of a property has changed. This interface requires an implementation of a property changed event, which you use when notifying a property has been changed. Using this method generally requires multiple implementations, and it usually is wise to create a base class that handles this, often creating an ObservableObject class for your view models to be derived from, then calling a method in its base class to handle these updates. Here's an example of what our base class may look like when implementing this interface. So here you'll see we have a public class called ObservableObject, and this will inherit the INotifyPropertyChanged interface. And then we have a protected void called PropertyChanged. Normally I'll name it onPropertyChanged, and we supply it with a parameter of a string value, which would be the property name. Then we check if the property changed event is null, and if not, then we will set the property changed event, and we will pass it the current class and supply it a new property changed event argument supplied with the property name that was passed as the parameter. Here is an example of what our view models may look like when having the object as its base class and utilizing its property changed method. So notice we have our view model inherit the observable object, and then when we change a property, we call the property changed method, which signals its value has changed. If the name property is bound to text block, for example, its text value will update accordingly. This can have code smell. You may realize that this can cause our code to get a little bulky. If we have a large amount of controls bound to many changeable properties and implement them all as previously shown, things can get pretty ugly. This is why we must also be very aware that we follow solid principles. If we begin to notice implementing this is becoming a little chaotic, we need to ask ourselves, are we giving our view model too many responsibilities? There is a more elegant way to implement this, but as for now, I'm going to keep things simple. Okay, so now that we're back from the slides, we are going to, like we mentioned, work on implementing the ObservableObject class. So we're going to go over to our Notify Change project, add, class, and here we're going to create an ObservableObject. Alright, we'll create that. It'll be a public class, and this will have to use the INotifyPropertyChanged interface. So INotifyPropertyChanged. Off the bat we won't have it, so we'll hit Control period and add in our system.componentModel namespace. Now that we have that, we'll have a little error because we haven't implemented the interface to this class just yet. So this is why we will create a public event of a property changed event handler, and we will call this property changed. We then will create a protected void of onPropertyChanged. It'll take a string parameter of the property name, and then we will check if the property changed event does not equal null. Then our property changed, pass it this class, and then a new property changed event args, and we will also send this the parameter of the property name. So the reason we do this is because as we create more view models, each view model would need to have exactly what we created here. And we don't want to duplicate code, and it would just become pretty cumbersome after we create a few view models. So by creating this, any class that we plan on having observable properties to the user from the view, then it will inherit from the observable object, and if those properties are subject to change, we can simply call this protected void here, which if we have the observable object as our base class, we can use this method here, and we'll call the onPropertyChanged with the property name, and it will update it as so. Next, we need to create a view models folder. We're only going to be working with view models today because it's not going to be too big of a project. And now that we have that, we want to create first a person view model, which actually reminds me, let me go back real quick. I don't know why I skipped through that. Let me go back real quick and explain exactly what the hell we're even making here. Well, first we have the welcome unknown. So if it doesn't know your name, it'll just say unknown. And basically here is where we're going to put in the text box the name, your name. So once you change your name, it'll say welcome Joe, John, Jerry, Catherine, whatever. So if you haven't left the video after this terrible start off here, let's go back to our view models. And we're going to go to our view models, and we're going to create a person view model. Okay, and this will be a public class, and this will inherit our observable object, and then we will create a private string name, and then we will create a public string name with a get. And basically if we input a empty string, because we're going to do one way to source and then one way explicit, so if we're going to do that, we want to make sure if this is not declared that it'll at least return something, because we don't want to break the binding by throwing an error. So we're going to say if string dot is null or empty, we'll pass it our private name here. So if it is null or empty, we're simply going to return unknown. And then obviously if it's not, it'll continue on to here, and we will simply return the value of the name. Then we are going to do a set, and here's where we will set the name to the value passed, and then we will call our onPropertyChanged name. So if this does not yet have a value, which it won't once we instantiate it, it'll just return unknown. And then as the name property here is supplied a new value to give to our private string here, it'll update the onPropertyChanged, and then once it does that, whatever we bind to this property will then again call the getAccessor, and it'll get the private string we have here, but it's a new value because we changed it. Then we said it changed, so then it'll recall it and get it again. Next, if we go here to our main view, we are also going to be changing the background color of our grid by using these buttons. So we're going to create a background view model. Okay, and here we'll have a public class. This will be derived from our observable object. And in here, we're going to have a private brush. We'll hit Control period, enter in our system.windows.media namespace. So brush, this will hold the color. Then we're going to say a public brush color, our get, and then again, we don't want to break any bindings, so we're going to say if our color is null, then we will return brushes.red, because I think red is a good indicator of something bad. And then we'll say return color if it does have a value. Then we're also going to do set, and we'll say color equals the value we provide, and then again we'll call our onPropertyChanged color. So this is going to be pretty quick. Now one last thing we need is a main view model to tie it all together. So we'll go to our view models again. Going to say class main view model, and here's our public class, and then we are going to create a public person view model that we will call person, but actually we need to make it a property, so because we are going to be binding, so we'll say public get private set, and we're going to say a public background view model, and we will appropriately call this background, and we'll say get private set. Then ctor tab to create a constructor real quick, and we will instantiate these to just empty declarations for the beginning. This way we can actually see our null checking as well. Okay, and since with the person name I'm going to be showing you binding one way to source and updating its source trigger, but for the backgrounds we're going to have to actually set those manually. So here we're going to do a public void set background, pass it a brush, again control period to add in the system.windows media, and then we're going to say brush color. And then here we are simply going to say background dot color equals brush color. So now we have it all tied together. You might want to fast forward maybe 10 seconds if you don't want to hear me, because I'm just going to go through each of these real quick. So we got our main view model here, which will hold our person view model and our background view model. And off the bat, we are going to just have these as blank instances. So by default, we will get our default values that we set here. For example, our name will return unknown. So we'll get our name. If it's null or empty, it'll return unknown, and then if not, it'll return the value. And we have our onPropertyChanges being called to the public property, because this is what we're going to be binding to. You don't want to say the property name of the private string, you want it of the public one we are bound to. And same goes for the background. So now we'll go over to our main view model. So here we are in our main view model. Hello to you who have fast forward. And now we're going to start binding from our XAML to these view models. So first things first is we're going to look at our text blocks. So right now it's set to just say welcome unknown. So now we need to bind it to our person's name. So we're going to say binding person dot name, and because we want a welcome message, we are also now going to learn about string format, so comma string format, and here we'll type how we want to format it. So we want it to say welcome, and then 0 in the brackets, which if you're familiar with working with console applications or any other string format in code behind, it's similar to when you do that and then you pass the value afterwards. So it'll say welcome, and then it'll insert whatever value it's bound to. Next, we're going to have our text box here, which is where we're going to see our one way to source. So this is where we're going to also say this is bound to the person name, but we're going to set its mode, so comma mode, to one way to source. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Next we have our red, blue background and yellow background buttons. We're going to just set events for these right off the bat. So we're going to say red clicked, enter, hop back to our main window, select our blue button, go to its click event, blue clicked, and hop back to our main window. I wish there was a quicker way to do this. Maybe there is. If you know a quicker way to set all these events, put in the comments. So yellow clicked. Alright, so now we have our events. One thing we're also going to notice, and I'll run the application just because it is not going to work yet. Okay, right now you'll notice we have nothing displayed, and doing nothing doesn't work just yet, and because we haven't set the data context. So this is where we have our main view model, control period, we need to enter in our view model's namespace, and we're going to call this underscore main, and off the bat we'll just create a new instance of it. And then now we need to set the data context of this window to main. Whoops. Data context equals underscore main. Alright, and now if we go to our red clicked, blue clicked, yellow clicked, we can say main dot set background brushes, and this is what? Red? Oh. Okay. That is kind of a problem, but I'll talk about that later. Main set background blue. Whoops, not blue clicked. Brushes blue. And then for yellow, main dot set background brushes yellow. And you'll notice earlier I just said, oops, we might have a problem. That's because our red clicked is, if we go back to our background view model, is what we set for when it's null. So we're going to have to change that to get a accurate indicator. And I like orange, so let's do orange. So we'll change that to orange. We'll go back to our main view. So now we have all of this. I'm going to say start without debugging because that little tool up above gets a little annoying. So notice now it's going to say welcome unknown. And let's test our backgrounds. So our backgrounds are not working. So we're going to have to fix that in just a second. But let's see if our welcome message is working. So if I say my name is Joe, notice it's not changing. But if I hit submit, it's going to change. The submit isn't doing anything, but the fact that I am changing the focus of the text box will then update it. So I could say Jerry, and I could click our not working background buttons and see it'll update. What we didn't do is we didn't bind it to anything. Where did we, we passed everything, but we didn't bind our grid's background to it. So we're going to say background binding background dot color. Okay, so now we'll run the application again to see if our background buttons work. And notice now that should have been the initial indicator actually. Now we have the orange background, red, blue, yellow. So now we can change our backgrounds, which is pretty cool. But we still have a problem. When we type in our text box here, it only changes when we hit the arbitrary submit button to lose focus. So one way of changing this is by updating the source trigger, which you can access when binding. So if we do comma after our mode, one way to source, we'll say comma, and this is where we'll access, you like my little accent there? Access the update source trigger. And this is where we will set it to property changed. So actually, let me go rewind equals. So you'll notice here we have default, and then we have, like, for example, lost focus, which is when we clicked the button. So it would change when the control loses focus. And then we have property change, and I'll go over explicit and stuff another time. But so here we set it to property change. So whenever the value changes in the text block, that's when it'll update the one way to source. So now I will go to debug, and I'm going to start without debugging, so I don't get the annoying tool that covers up our welcome message. So here we have welcome, and I click it, and as I type, J-O-E, you'll see it updates. I could say, yeah, Mary, I guess. I don't know why. Yeah. So we'll do that, and then as we erase it, it goes back to unknown. I could say Jessica, same thing, erase, and it'll go back to unknown. And our backgrounds are still working. So I hope I didn't move through that too quickly. At the bottom of this video right now, there should be a link to give me a survey on how you like this video. I'm trying to work on improving things, and it's easier when you guys are more vocal with me. So you can take the little survey below. It's like 5 seconds, and it'll just ask you questions about this video and what I could have improved on, or what you didn't like, or what you did like. And you can take that. If you have like annotations turned off or whatever, it should be in the description as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I do plan on next doing learning about the iCommand interface and relay commands, or command delegates. So that should be really interesting, because we'll be able to use our notify property changes with that tutorial as well. So it'll be useful to have this and then move on to that. And I also do plan on having a future tutorial, kind of like our machine view model one, but in this case we'll be just creating a simple contacts book application where you can store contact information of people's names, phone numbers, addresses, etc. So with all that being said, like the video, comment on it, or dislike it if you didn't like it, and all I ask is if you do that, just at least let me know what you didn't like, and subscribe. So thanks for watching.